This happened to me Wednesday night. And honestly, it's the first time I've ever genuinely felt unsafe in a rideshare. My boyfriend lives in the next town over. For the past several months, he's been ordering Lyfts for me whenever I go to see him. We've done it countless times, never had a problem. That night was completely normal at first. We spent the whole day together, had dinner, watched movies. Nothing unusual. Around midnight, he ordered me a Lyft home. A few minutes later, the driver pulled up outside his apartment. Before I got in, my boyfriend kissed me goodbye through the open car door. I remember the driver watching us the entire time, not casually, just staring. At first, I didn't think much of it. The driver looked to be maybe in his 40s. He told me he was from Cuba, barely spoke English. Most of the conversation happened through Google Translate on his phone. As soon as I opened the back door, he immediately asked if I could sit in the front seat instead. He typed something into his phone and showed me the screen. I don't like people sitting behind me. It felt a little strange, but not strange enough to argue about. So I agreed. But then, instead of unlocking the front passenger door, he told me to climb over the center console from the back seat. That was the first moment I felt uncomfortable, because while I was climbing over, I realized he was watching me the entire time, not helping, not looking away, just staring. Once I finally sat down, he smiled and typed something else into his phone. "I hope this is not too daring, but you are very beautiful." I gave a quick awkward laugh and thanked him. But internally, something already felt off. At first, the conversation stayed somewhat normal. He asked if the music volume was okay, asked if the temperature was fine, stuff like that. Then suddenly he asked, "Am I taking you home?" I told him yes, and almost immediately after that, he asked, "Can I come home with you?" I laughed nervously because I genuinely didn't know how to respond. I just told him no. Then he asked about my boyfriend, wanted to know if we were married, how long we'd been together. I told him he was my boyfriend, and that we were serious. That's when the entire vibe changed. He smiled again and translated something else. "Can I also be your boyfriend?" At that point, I stopped laughing. I told him absolutely not. He kept pushing, asking why, telling me that where he comes from, people have multiple partners, that not everyone has to know. I kept rejecting him as politely as I could, because by then, I was getting genuinely nervous. The thing people don't understand in situations like that is that you don't want to upset someone who's driving you alone at night, especially when you're trapped inside their car. So even though I was uncomfortable, I stayed calm, kept smiling, kept trying not to make things worse. After a few minutes, he got quiet, and honestly, that silence felt worse. Then out of nowhere, he typed something again and held up the phone. "Your boyfriend made a mistake sending you home alone." That sentence hit me immediately. Not because of what he said, but because of the way he looked at me afterward, like he expected me to respond, like he wanted to see if I was scared. I just looked down at my phone and pretended to text someone, even though I wasn't typing anything. A few minutes later, he asked again if he could come inside my house. Again, I told him no. Then he started telling me how much money he had, how he could take care of me, how I deserved another boyfriend. At that point, I was counting every second until we got to my house, and when we finally pulled into my driveway, I felt immediate relief. But then he parked and didn't unlock the doors right away. Instead, he turned toward me one last time, pulled out his phone again, and translated another sentence. "Can I come inside with you now?" I didn't even answer him. I grabbed my bags, unlocked the door myself, and got out as fast as I could. He quickly got out too, trying to follow me while offering to help with my things. I told him no, didn't even look back. I practically ran to my front door, got inside, locked every single lock behind me. Then I immediately called my boyfriend. I remember standing there in complete silence after the call ended, looking out through the window blinds, waiting to see if the car would leave. And for about 30 seconds, it didn't. The car just sat there, idle, right outside my house, before finally driving away. My boyfriend reported him immediately, but apparently nothing really came from it. To this day, I still think about how different that night could have gone if I had reacted the wrong way or made him angry, and ever since then, I've never fully relaxed in a rideshare again. This happened to me about 2 years ago, and even now, it still makes me uncomfortable to think about. At the time, I had booked a taxi through a licensed local company to take me home from a friend's house. This was before rideshare apps completely took over. Back then, people still trusted regular taxi firms a lot more. It was early evening when the driver arrived, just starting to get dark outside. As I walked out to the car, the driver stepped out to meet me. He looked to be in his 50s, normal-looking guy, nothing outwardly strange about him. But as we walked back toward the taxi together, he briefly placed his hand on my shoulder, not enough to stop me, not aggressive, just deliberate. And I remember immediately thinking, why is this guy touching me? It lasted maybe a second, but something about it bothered me instantly. Still, I convinced myself I was overreacting. I was in my 20s at the time. I figured maybe it was just a generational thing, so I got into the back seat. The drive home should have taken maybe 20 minutes, straightforward route. Busy roads, nothing complicated. At first, the conversation was normal. He told me I was his final ride of the night, said he had no plans afterward. And for some reason, that comment made me uneasy. But then I started rationalizing it. He worked for a licensed company. His ID badge was displayed on the dashboard. His name, photo, registration number, everything was visible. Plus, my friend used that taxi company all the time. So logically, I told myself I was safe. For most of the ride, I stayed on my phone, mostly just distracting myself, trying to ignore this weird, nervous feeling I couldn't explain. After a while, I finally looked out the window again. By then, it was fully dark outside, and I expected we'd be close to my apartment, but we weren't, not even close. I immediately realized I had no idea where we were. The area outside looked completely abandoned. Dark buildings, empty streets, run-down apartment blocks, cars that looked like they hadn't moved in years. And the worst part was, this area wasn't remotely on the route home. At first I thought maybe he took a wrong turn, but then I noticed something else. The driver kept slowly looking down side streets, left, right, left again, like he was searching for something, and the car had started slowing down. That's when I heard his breathing, heavy, uneven, almost excited. And I can't fully explain this part, but suddenly I knew something was wrong. Not suspected, knew. I had this overwhelming feeling that he was trying to find somewhere isolated to stop the car. I remember my entire body going cold, and before I could even properly think, I just blurted something out. I said, "My friend is expecting me home already." He didn't respond, didn't even look at me, so I kept talking, fast. I told him my friend would call the taxi company if I didn't answer my phone, that she was overly paranoid about stuff like this, that she'd probably contact the police. The second I mentioned that, everything changed. He immediately turned away from the deserted streets. A few minutes later, we were back on a main road. Then eventually, I started recognizing places again. The entire rest of the drive was silent. Finally, after a while, he quietly said, "I'm sorry if I made you worried," but the way he said it didn't sound normal. It sounded like someone pretending nothing happened. And honestly, that wasn't even the worst part. When we got near my apartment building, I made a quick decision. I didn't want him knowing exactly where I lived, so I lied. I told him I needed to stop at a convenience store nearby for milk. He dropped me there without arguing. I went inside and stayed for a few minutes, just trying to calm down. Then eventually I left and started walking home. It was only a few minutes away. By then, it was completely dark outside, and the area around my apartment building was poorly lit. As I turned the corner toward my building, I saw a car parked across from the entrance, and instantly, I knew it was him. I didn't even want to look directly at the car. I just started walking faster, pulled my keys out, got inside the building as quickly as possible. The second I got into my apartment, I went straight to the window, and there he was, sitting in the car, facing my building, just staring. I remember this horrible realization hitting me. He knew I had lied about the milk, because I came out of the store empty-handed, meaning he had followed me there. Then followed me home. A few minutes later, my friend called, asking why the ride took so long. It had been almost an hour, a trip that should have taken 20 minutes. I told her everything, and while I was still on the phone with her, I looked out the window again. The car was finally gone. I never reported the driver, and honestly, I regret that now. At the time, I kept doubting myself, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, that maybe he really did just get lost. But deep down, I know what I felt in that car, and I still believe, if I hadn't mentioned calling someone that night, something very bad would have happened to me. I live in a very isolated rural area in Belgium. The nearest stores, banks, or towns are all pretty far away, so instead of constantly driving myself everywhere, I usually use a local taxi service. The company had always been extremely professional, clean cars, friendly drivers. Usually the same few people every time, Never had a single problem with them. Then one day, a new driver picked me up. At first, nothing seemed strange. He was friendly, talkative, maybe a little too talkative, but otherwise normal. During the drive, he randomly started telling me personal information about himself, his age, where he was from, random details about his life that I never asked for. At one point, he started talking about a printer he had bought. Apparently, he couldn't connect it to his phone. I gave him a couple quick suggestions, since I work in IT, and that was basically the end of the conversation. At least, that's what I thought. A couple weeks later, I got the same driver again, and immediately, something felt different. The second I got into the car, he greeted me by my first name. That instantly caught my attention, because I had never told him my name before. Then things got even stranger. He asked me how my father was doing. I remember just freezing for a second, because I had definitely never mentioned my father to him, not once. The entire ride after that felt uncomfortable. But I kept trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe he looked me up online. Maybe the taxi company gave drivers customer information. I don't know. Still, something about the way he talked felt wrong. Too familiar, too personal. A few days later, I needed another ride into town, and unfortunately, he was the one who picked me up again. The moment I opened the car door, I had this immediate urge to get back out. You know those moments where your instincts are screaming at you, even though nothing has technically happened yet? That's exactly what it felt like. This time, he acted even more comfortable around me, joking constantly, using my first name repeatedly, talking like we were friends. When we arrived at the store, I immediately called dispatch to request a different driver for the trip home. But the dispatcher told me another taxi was already nearby and would pick me up shortly. And of course, it was him again. He got out smiling and helped load my bags into the trunk. But while doing it, he positioned himself directly behind me, way too close. Then he slowly ran his hand across my back. Not accidental, not casual, a deliberate touch. And I remember my entire body going cold instantly. That's when he told me I needed to sit in the front seat because the rear doors supposedly had a locking issue. At that point, I just wanted the ride to be over. So against my better judgment, I got in. That was a mistake. The second we started driving, his entire attitude changed. He became intensely curious, asking invasive questions, trying to steer every conversation towards sex. At first it was subtle, then it became blatant. He started making disgusting comments, sexual jokes, weird references I didn't fully understand at first. The entire time, he kept smiling. This awkward, forced smile that never really changed. And while talking, he kept making these small movements with his hands toward me. I remember pressing myself against the passenger door, staring at the unlock button the entire ride. That's when I realized something else. The rear doors weren't broken at all. The dashboard showed no warnings, nothing. He lied to get me into the front seat beside him. Then things got even worse. Instead of taking the normal route home, he suddenly turned onto isolated back roads through heavily wooded areas. A trip that should have taken maybe 15 minutes ended up taking almost an hour. No houses, no traffic, no people. Just dark roads surrounded by trees. I kept trying to stay calm, laughing awkwardly, giving vague answers, trying not to upset him. But internally, I was panicking. I don't know what this guy intended to do, and honestly, I don't want to know. The second we arrived near my house, I grabbed every bag at once and got out immediately. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. I practically rushed inside, locked the door, and just stood there, trying to calm down. Then about an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was him. He had somehow gotten my WhatsApp number. I didn't even open the message. I blocked him instantly. After that, I contacted the taxi company and explained everything. The employee on the phone immediately asked, "Are you talking about why?" The way he said it honestly made my stomach drop, like he already knew exactly who I meant. When I confirmed it was him, the employee just replied, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And the tone he used still bothers me, because it sounded less like surprise and more like this wasn't the first complaint they'd received about him. I stopped using that taxi company after that, and even now, I still wonder what would have happened if that drive through the woods had lasted any longer. Before you fall asleep tonight, check the locks one more time. And if you ever feel uncomfortable in a rideshare or taxi, trust your instincts immediately. Subscribe for more true disturbing horror stories uploaded weekly.